It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I congratulate my right honourable friend for Aldridge Brownhills for securing what is an incredibly important debate as the other place continue their deliberations over the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, and we can start to see some of the measures that particularly my right honourable friend for Chipping Barnet and my honourable friend for Isle of Wight, who I work closely alongside in many of those amendments, get to see some of the big wins to try and start protecting the countryside, green belt, open countryside, greenfield sites from development, and push it much more towards the government's stated aim of brownfield development. And I do want to start by trying to define a little bit that we are not just talking about green belt. That is a very technical term. It is vitally important to many honourable and right honourable members' constituencies, but in a constituency like mine, 335 square miles of North Buckinghamshire, we have very little technical green belt, but I do have that volume of space of open countryside. 90% of the land I am fortunate enough to represent in this place is agricultural land. And I think it is important when we debate these matters, not dissimilar to some of the points that the Honourable Member for Hemsworth made, that my right honourable friend for Chipping Barnet made, is that there is a point to the countryside. It is not just there to be pretty and beautiful, although it is both of those things for people to enjoy for leisure, to walk and to camp and to do all of the things that we all enjoy the countryside for, but it has a very specific purpose. The first one of those, I would hope, is obvious, and that is to produce the food that we all enjoy eating, and indeed the drink we enjoy drinking as part of the vital backbone of our national economy, but also for things like water management, and to allow drainage to run, and for the rivers to flow and the chalk streams to be vibrant and active. And the more that we build over open countryside, greenbelt land, agricultural land, the greater the risk we have to both of those things. And if I just take a couple of examples from my own constituency to start with, the village of Ickford, which I spoke about in the Public Bill Committee of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill as an example on some of the amendments we looked at around flooding. The village is a small village close towards the Oxfordshire border of Buckinghamshire. There is a site there that Deanfield Homes is currently, or is almost finished, building almost 90 homes on. That is a site that has always been known to flood. It is in the floodplain of the River Tame. Throughout the planning process, though, it was allowed to be that every excuse under the sun could be accepted. Every clever scheme that was brought up for clever drainage solutions or whatever it might be was proposed and accepted ultimately by the planning inspectorate. But of course, there are no surprises in the fact that that land continues to flood to this day, to the point that the developers have even raised the level at which they are building the houses, with the fancy graphics used on the marketing materials even showing these enormous slopes in the back gardens to allow for the water runoff, which of course goes into the existing and older properties in that village. And only this week I've heard from a concerned constituent in the village of Haddenham, which has seen considerable development over recent decades, reporting that a development to the back of their house on the clays off Churchway, the drainage pond that's been put in there as they start to dig foundations has been way above its natural level for some time. The amount of concrete that is going down in those foundations is forcing the water across towards this particular cul-de-sac, which in this instance is surrounded by walls made out of a cob unique to Buckinghamshire called Witchet, which if it gets wet, I can assure honourable and right honourable members very quickly falls down. So we do have to ensure, by encouraging the development of the houses we need, as well as the commercial property we need, onto brownfield sites, onto regeneration sites. And I very much appreciate the soundbite that my right honourable friend came up with about the regeneration generation. That is an important thing, that we are being cautious around the impact that development on the countryside brings to flooding. But of course, the big one in this is around food security. The more we build over our countryside, our farmland, our prime agricultural land, the lower our self-sufficiency is going to drop. We're already down to about 60%. Of course, we'll never hit 100% because there are lots of things we like to eat and drink that can't be grown in this country. But the more we build over our agricultural land, the more reliance we will have on imports, which is a crazy place to be. And I was pleased when, off the back of an amendment I originally put down to the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, the government and the Secretary of State agreed to put into the consultation on the new NPPF, for the first time ever, reference that food production can be considered in the planning process. I think that is important, and I urge the Minister to ensure that that makes it through to the final NPPF. But more than that planning authorities are given a clear instruction up and down the land that that is something that is now available to them. That is something they can use, because a big flaw in the current NPPF, the previous NPPF, if we can call it that, around best and most versatile agricultural land, is that it was so often walked all over and ignored by planning authorities and indeed the planning inspectorate. And so if the Minister in her response can give some assurances around the pressure government will put down to planning authorities and the planning inspectorate around the provisions that hopefully will at some point in the not too distant future be the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act and the new NPPF, that would be very much appreciated by my constituents. And the last point I would make is also around consistency within the planning inspectorate. Because if we are to achieve this ambition that the homes we need, the commercial we need, the solar panels we need will in fact be on brownfield sites and rooftops in the case of the latter, rather than across our fields can come to be on brownfield sites, we are going to need consistency in the planning process. And I have a perverse case that has come to light in land that was always believed to be protected as a buffer zone, open countryside next to the town of Prince's Risborough in my constituency, where despite two previous planning inspectorate decisions saying that land should be protected, a third planning inspector has now granted permission to retrospectively permit a number of plots that have been developed on that site, which has led the residents of the hamlet of Askett and nearby hamlet of Meadle to be up in arms. We need consistency from the planning inspectorate when looking at these matters, and however it can come to be through the Minister's good offices, we need that clarity to be pushed down, not just to planning authorities, but the planning inspectorate as well. But the facts speak for themselves, as my right honourable friend for Aldridge Brownhills, the Honourable Lady for Wirral West and others have referenced. The plots are out there on brownfield land. The CPRE's data is pretty clear. 1.2 million. 1.2 million. The government's manifesto talked of an ambition of 300,000 houses. This can deliver 1.2 million, but without touching a blade of grass on the green belt, on precious agricultural land or open countryside nature reserves, and so much more. So I urge the government to be bold in this ambition to move to brownfield. I would suggest, certainly.
It's very kind of him to do that. I think he's just made the case very clearly. Would he agree with me that we need to have a much more positive way in which we talk about brownfield development? So if you look at somewhere like Wirral, which is a peninsula, the development plans that Wirral Council wants to have is for the development of the east side of the borough, which are brownfield sites with fantastic views of the Liverpool city skyline. So these can be incredibly exciting urban developments that people will want to live in, but we need the political drive to make sure that that happens. So a lot of these brownfield sites have a lot to them in terms of design that can be very attractive for people.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for her intervention. I do fundamentally agree with that proposition. There are lots of brownfield sites out there that do offer those spectacular views, whether it's of a skyline or out towards the countryside or whatever it might be. That the big challenge that we need to get there on that, yes, is political ambition, but it is also a recognition within the tax system, essentially, through the infrastructure levy, to ensure that those prospective developers don't look at the brownfield site and a comparator in the greenbelt or open countryside and say, it is far cheaper for us to develop the countryside. If we can have that sliding scale in the infrastructure levy or whatever it might be that makes it cost neutral to the developer so that they would pay far less infrastructure levy or some other form of taxation for developing that brownfield site, I think that is a quick political win to get us to the brownfield development that I think pretty much everybody, that all honourable and right honourable members that have spoken in this debate so far want to see. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent.